I'm Bethany Collins. I'm originally from Montgomery, Alabama, but I've been living in New York for the past year, completing a residency at the Studio Museum in Harlem. I am a visual artist, mixed media, primarily drawing, but I'll kind of use whatever needs to be used and is at my disposal. And then I also think of myself as a conceptual artist as well. My longest running series, and also the series that kind of embodies or encapsulates my work. It started in graduate school when I was at Georgia State University. And I was already making work about race and identity, but it was leading to these very awkward conversations. It had much more to do with the speaker and their understanding of race than it had to do with the work that I was making. So my work has progressed from being just about race and identity to being about race, identity, and language. So my first attempt at language, using language, was very much from a personal context. So it was whatever I was hearing in grad school critiques. Outward from there, then I started to pull from kind of my own historical language, then stuff that I'd heard prior to grad school outside of that setting, but that was still very personal to me. You know, from the beginning of that White Noise series, the language that has interested me has become progressively expansive, or it's not broader, it's just further and giving distance from my own self. The language from my contronym series, though, I started to pull, from these kind of authoritative texts, so from dictionaries from the 1950s all the way to the 1980s. This language that was very colonial, very authoritative, and that was still somewhat problematic for me. And so I started to pull, words, contronyms then that are words that contain their own opposites. And I started to use those and kind of play with the true definition of a thing. Since then, though, and this is new to something I started working on at the Bemis, it's less about how things are defined. And I think that's me letting go of a hope, I think, that there is one way that this thing can be defined. If I just weed through it, then I'll find how it should be. While reading through and searching and researching for these contronyms, I've found in those contronyms more ways of speaking, focusing on the language that feels like how we say things to get at something that is not clearly defined. I did one that'll be in the show in Chicago this fall, and it's fine, which is in and of itself is a contronym. But then from there, there's these little beautiful italicized phrases within it, like I'm fine and you. And they're kind of posited on opposite ends of the page. And so they don't quite speak to each other, but they do, and they feel so separated and isolated, but they're in conversation. And then for some reason, it's these ways of speaking that have become more interesting than the actual ways of defining a thing.